Independence Secretariat, which coordinated the preparations for independence and all of the connected celebratory events, essentially etched George's name in the annals of Bahamian history as the birth of a new nation emerged. As an executive, George is perhaps best known in his capacity as Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries, and Local Government, where he superintended the accelerated production of agricultural and marine products, goods and services that led to the economic. As the chairman of Bahamas Telecommunications Corporation, George was instrumental in introducing cellular services, and as chairman of the Hotel Corporation of the Bahamas, he led key developments in our tourism sector. As a diplomat, George served ably as the non-resident High Commissioner to the Republic of Singapore. I note George's most recent assignment in public service as special advisor to myself for the 50th anniversary of independence celebrations. Suffice it to say, George's commitment to our nation extended beyond his professional achievements. The Bahamas forward. Today, we also fondly remember our dearly departed brother and the role he played in mentoring the next generation of political leaders in this country. He is quite proud to be able to shepherd the career of his now MP Chester Cooper, who is the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Tourism, Investment and International Trade, and the Deputy Leader of the Progressive Liberal Party. George was steadfast in his dedication to empowering ordinary Bahamians, and his tireless advocacy for progress and change will remain his enduring legacy. His life and legacy will continue to inspire generations of Bahamians, and his memory will forever be etched in the annals of our nation's history. Such is the meaning of life, Mr. Speaker. I shall miss him, and many of us who've had the pleasure of enjoying his company over the many years. Sometimes I used to call him the irritant, and he was a good irritant, a good irritant, and it's like the was it Joe Lewis, who speaks about getting in good trouble. John Lewis, getting in good trouble. Well, Joe. So on behalf of the government and people of the Bahamas and myself, Anne-Marie and my family, my children knew him as Uncle George because they were all very close for many, many years. And to my and Philip, his nephews and nieces, especially Frank Smith, one of our former colleagues here, we want to wish them all our sincerest condolences in this their time of prison.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Exeter's Right and Ragged Island.
Well, my math was a bit off. It's from 68 to 97.
29, yeah.
That sounds to me like 29, not 25. So I just wanted the record to reflect. He served this honorable house for 29 consecutive fruitful years in the school. And Madam Speaker, I beg to lay my contribution to George Smith.
Certainly, Honourable Member. Order that the document be brought up.
Thank you.
on the document to land it.
To the Honorable George A. Smith. George was a great man, a great member of Parliament, and a great friend. He was born in Exuma. He attended the Georgetown All-Age School, and he was simply a legend to me and so many other Exumians. George was a member of Parliament for Exuma and the Rollville constituency at one point in Exuma. As the Prime Minister pointed out, George was. We loved him and love him still to this day. Not only did Exuma know George and know that he had our back, but we knew we sent a fighter to the House of Assembly who would work to make the lives better for everyone. He was Exumian, true and true, but his national reach advanced the well-being of all Bahamians. It is because of George and soldiers like him that we were able to achieve majority rule in this country. I found it profoundly inspiring when Sir Arthur Fulks recalled in an article he wrote in 2005, and I quote, "I met George Smith when he was a young insurance agent back in the white side of the Bahamian racial divide at the time. But he chose to throw in his lot with the struggle for majority of the Constitution. And it's because of George and the patriots like him that we are an independent nation today." George was a true progressive who fought for the cause every day God gave him breath. As Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries, and Local Government, he made it his mission to empower people of BTC. He drove communications in the country forward. As chairman of the Hotel Corporation of the Bahamas, he was instrumental in driving tourism. Even in his 50th years of Bahamian independence, and he was non-resident envoy to the Republic of Singapore, and he did promise that I would travel with him to present his credentials. The nation has lost an outstanding son and a true patriot. For me and many, many people in Exuma, this loss is personal because, as I said, he was a friend. For Exuma, George can be credited with much of the infrastructural works in what we call the West, including connecting Barataria to the mainland with 2 bridges. His track record, everywhere he went, he was kind and generous, and people knew he would do his best if they needed assistance. For the Exuma Keys, he showed. When I campaigned, the fellas on the blocks in Black Point asked me to pattern my representation after him, and that is what I did. As deputy leader of the PLP they loved so dearly, and even prouder when I eventually became deputy prime minister. In fact, during elections, George was consistently active. We shared many lunches over the years, and I benefited tremendously from the wise counsel he would always offer. He was a man who spoke truth to power, even when it was politically inconvenient, and encouraged me to be sure that I speak my truth as well. George is a man with range, with an intellectual or an investor, and he was always concerned about the people. It was his passion and his purpose. And one of the last times George and I were together was at the opening of the Forbes Hill Cultural Village in the settlement where I was born. He gave brief remarks that lasted about 25 minutes. He put his arms around me and told for having known him. The Bahamas is better for having had his service. The Prime Minister and I have had occasion to honor him recently at the Exuma Music and Heritage Festival, fitting of his decades-long support for culture, heritage, homecomings, and regatta. We've also spoken, and I know that we, together with the Progressive Liberal Party and our government, will find an even more tangible monument that will signal on the Exuma Keys and Bahamians everywhere. On behalf of my dear wife, Cecilia, and all of my family, on behalf of the Exuma branch of the PLP and PLPs near and far, and Philip, his nephew Frank, his niece Phyllis, who I now had an opportunity to work with closely, and the entire family, and his many, many, many friends. May he rest in peace.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Member, would you like to table your contribution? Yes. Order the document be brought up. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Fox Hill.
Yeah, all right. Sorry. Madam Speaker, first thing I want to do before speaking about our friend George is to say that Steve Rose says to tell you happy birthday down from Akron, sir. So I hope they heard that. You got the message, right? Great. So, and not so much about the public George Smith that you've heard about, because it may seem a rather unusual choice for me to be speaking about him. But I've said to younger politicians that this expression, politics is a fortuitous business. And the main thing is actually to just be present, because most of it is luck. And so in the fall of 1975, I was then the chair of the Central Branch of the Progressive Liberal Party, and report of the branch, which is, of course, usually one of the most boring exercises that you could ever go through, and nobody's in the room when this takes place. But on the morning, and I'm praying to myself, I'm saying, now, you know, if I get to speak after Ali, nobody's going to be in the room because he's gone. So I better be. And as it turned out, I was the last speaker before Ali appeared. So the room was full. All the ministers, everybody was there. And I gave this speech, led by Loftus Roca, who were claiming me as their protege. And George Smith was one of those. And up until and through the 1977 campaign. And there is no substitute for that kind of hands-on experience with politicians who themselves are experienced. And it was open, there was no guile associated with it, and we had long journeys with his man, Rocker, going from and the roads, of course, in Exuma were horrible in those days, so and then with Philip and his campaign in North Long Island, at Rumkey and San Salvador, in the constituency there. And so that was the beginning of a long and fruitful journey. And I had the occasion to speak to Philip, his brother, to thank them, really, both of them, for allowing that opportunity, because this would not have been possible this morning if it had not been for their openness to allow that experience to take place. And it is something which I try to copy in my own public life with regard to politicians or people who are interested in public service. So you've heard that George Smith was the minister responsible for agriculture and fisheries. And his portfolio also included local government and the responsibility for the Family Island Regatta. So as a result of that, when the 25th anniversary of the regatta took place, the National Regatta took place, he appointed me to the committee to to memorialize and celebrate the 25th anniversary of the National Regatta. I think in that year he actually changed the nomenclature from Exuma Regatta to National Regatta, if I'm not mistaken, in that year. And of course, I got the opportunity as a result of that, one of the founders of the regatta back in the 1950s, and got the opportunity again to have an exchange with why they did some of the things they did, why the government acted in the way they did in some of those matters. So an interesting experience also down to George. He was the one of the signatories of the document of independence. You've heard that. Yes, of course. I've spoken to him as well. As a matter of fact, I called Loftus on the day that George died to say, well, you know, only you and Philip Bethel and all the now left with Arthur Folks. So that too was an interesting experience. And I know he was looking forward to this 50th anniversary celebration. I'm really sorry that he's not able to be here for the 50th anniversary. The Deputy Prime Minister referred to George's phenotype. And I want to go to that for a minute. There's a poem, I think it's by Robert Frost, that says, 2 roads in the wood. And I took the road, the one less traveled. And that has made all the difference. And I want to associate that with George Smith because what Arthur Folks says is a telling point about our country and those who may not recognize what our country was prior to 1967. If you want to have some idea of this, it's probably a good idea if you can get a hold of a book called Race and Politics in the Bahamas by Colin Hughes. And it outlines the history of the political struggle and this fault line of or cleavage in our politics of race. W.E.B. Du Bois says that in the 20th century, the color line would be the defining political line. And so George was sitting at a table or at the bar in what was then called Green Shutters. And a friend of ours, mutual friend of ours, Doc Sweeting, was cracking a joke with him. And he said, you know, George, you know when you go over to Miami, you could pass over there, right? And George did not crack a smile. That was not funny for him at all, because he identified as a black man. And, you know, in these days, in those days, that, as Arthur Folks was saying, that says something. And what defines you, I think, so much is that when you are in difficult times, not in the easy times, where you take your stand. And to me,
Good at boss.
that's right. No matter what happened after, no matter what happened after, no matter what was done, so on and so forth, the fact is he took that stand. And that defined, for me, who he was. And if you want some explanation of what this was like, Derek Burrows, who is a friend of mine from Sunday school at the Gospel Hall, did a movie called Before the Trees Were Strange. I think you should.
That's worth watching.
It's actually worth watching because it defines so much. And we were at a meeting the other day. My colleague Sean McQueenie was saying that, you know, we've never had any kind of national discussion on this issue of race in our politics, where it is and how it defines itself. Because, of course, there's a lot of embarrassment connected for some people with it. Some people, it goes to their identity. Not knowing that the one thing that I keep repeating from Martin Luther King is that the only thing that counts is the content of your character. all of this stuff, all this external stuff, has nothing at all to do with anything. The only thing is what kind of person you are. What kind of person you are. Are you honorable? Do you support your family? Do you support the country? Do you serve God? Those are the important things. The phenotype, unimportant. And when you read Colin Hughes's book about this issue, and you read Sean McQueenie's book, Breaching the Gate, about how important this all along in the history of our politics was, you'll see why I think it's important for us to put George Smith in the context of that struggle and where he stood as a great Bahamian. He's a great Bahamian, not a white one, not a black one, but Bahamian, and that supersedes almost in our 50th year. And it's really only left for me to say at this point my grateful thanks for helping to launch to any Bahamian coming up. And I send him to God, bless him on his way, and thank him most sincerely.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It is an honor on behalf of the Free National Movement and the opposition to join our voices with our colleagues opposite in paying tribute to the late George A. Smith. Madam Speaker, one of the reasons these occasions are both sad but special is because we are often standing to pay tribute to someone who has made an indelible contribution to the development of the Bahamas. And the reason why it is special, Madam Speaker, because it gives us an occasion to look at the complexity of our country and sometimes the complexity of the personality that we are paying tribute to. And George A. Smith was a very complex Bahamian. I grew up, Madam Speaker, knowing his name from the early days, from the days of being a student at the College of the Bahamas, demonstrating on Bay Street in the aftermath of the then Commission of Inquiry and being arrested as a young student for protesting downtown at that time. And Madam Speaker, there were a number of names of larger-than-life figures that as young activists at the College of the Bahamas we would recall. One of those figures was George A. Smith. He was a fixture in Bahamian politics. He was someone, Madam Speaker, who would be the first to say that he, like others, had his flaws. But what was clear, he was humble enough not to say the second half of the equation, but he was consistent in his interest in advancing the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And Madam Speaker, why these occasions are important in paying tribute, because it's one of the rarest occasions where policymakers in the House of Assembly say decent things about each other. Madam Speaker, in times of debt, it is the clearest a human mind often becomes, because we reduce things to its bare minimum. We recognize what is important. In times of debt, sometimes it's largely irrelevant who that person owed, because I mean, you certainly in most cases not going to get the funds then, and the persons who owed them will not pay it to their estate. But more importantly, in times of debt, you don't sweat the small stuff. You often try to look at the essence of the person that's lying before you. And in this case, George A. Smith, an outstanding Bahamian, a fixture in our political landscape, you look at the essence of the man. Despite his many accomplishments, he was a humble man. Even recently, as you talk to persons who engaged in conversations with him, he was a remarkable storyteller. And in telling the story, those that knew him well would tell you that while he may talk about things that he accomplished, it was never from a place of boasting. It was to put in context Bahamian history and the role that different persons played. As a young Exumian, George Smith developed a certain sensibility that was already referred to. This issue of color, we differ a little bit with the member for Fox Hill. It is relevant, but it's secondary. And Madam Speaker, Maulana Karanga, who's the founder of Kwanzaa, he talks about this, the 3 C's of defining who a person is. George Smith, in being willing to stand with the majority of Bahamians and support the empowerment of Bahamians of African descent to have one vote like everybody else, he obeyed that interesting formula by Maulana Karanga, the founder of Kwanzaa. He says there are the 3 C's: color, culture, and consciousness. George Smith had that consciousness that all men and women are created equal, deserve a right for full representation. And plus, it's not a controversial issue in any event. All of us descended from Africa. And so, Madam Speaker, George Smith in the early days cast his bucket with the vast majority of Bahamians, though he could have gained advantage associating with the minority population at that time. But George Smith, in his complex life, also revealed another thing. And that is, he revealed the thing that Lerone Bennett talked about. That is having this unique ability to erase historical biases without introducing new biases. So while he sought to ensure the enfranchisement and empowerment of the majority population, he was not on that mission to denigrate those that governed before, but unequally. And that's a valuable lesson to all of us. Because even on this side, we recognize sometimes that special card is played. And so in this moment, color is irrelevant. During some other debates, it is, unfortunately. So Madam Speaker, George Smith, the complex patriot, leaves with us valuable lessons. Lessons of why we must resist tribalism in politics. George Smith worked at the Bahamian Times alongside another Bahamian nationalist and patriot, Sir Arthur Folkes, the very one that we sought to conveniently omit from being at the table in 1972 as George Smith and others were. George Smith recognized the value and the beauty of the friendship with Sir Arthur Folkes. And he recognized that tribalism in the politics is most unfortunate. So even at the time when George Smith learned that Sir Arthur Folkes had been asked to resign, he took the time to spend time with his friend. When he resigned from the Progressive Liberal Party, George Smith recognized the value of friendship. And that must count for something. That must count for something in good times and bad times, when one party is in and one party is out. Because this is a complex society. And one of the lessons he left behind is that notwithstanding the colors we wear, we have to be careful that we continue to validate others, notwithstanding which political organization that they are a part of. And so even on this occasion, it's important for us, since we are open, to be reminded of that invaluable lesson. The dignity of all Bahamians, no matter what side of the political divide they're on. So he played an incredible role in majority rule and again in independence alongside patriots who wore different colors later in life. The member for Fox Hill made an interesting point. Yes, he was a mentor to many. And back then, the member for Fox Hill, who fought for the progressive cause, had occasion to pause to work also with policymakers on the other side of the political divide, which brings me to another dimension of the life of George Smith. He was an outspoken Bahamian, and so he had no difficulty in taking the Free National Movement to task, being careful, again, to value important friendships and the dignity of those on the other side. But he also held his own party to account and challenged the party when necessary. And that is also a valuable lesson he's leaving behind, that in the waning years of his life, as a young politician on the front line, I always found it admirable that he was prepared to critique the selection of candidates in his organization, to examine policies, and make public statements in some cases about whether or not the policy made sense for the ongoing development of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. When I went to Ministry of Agriculture, his name was a name that came up, having made incredible contributions in the area of agriculture. Well, that's something that was near and dear to him, given the role that Exuma played as one of the most productive centers in terms of agricultural development in the Bahamas. He went on in the Ministry of Tourism, when he served as the head of the Hotel Corporation, to play a pivotal role in the sale of certain assets, Radisson being identified as one of them, which predated the establishment of Bahama. He also was instrumental in Batelco. I close with this, Madam Speaker. George A. Smith impacted activists not just in the Progressive Liberal Party, but inside the Free National Movement. He made a contribution to this notion of being fearless in sharing your views. Secondly, speaking truth to power. Thirdly, maintaining ties across the political divide in a very meaningful way. So as we pay tribute to him, we remember all of those that worked closely with him in those early days, FNMs and PLPs. And I remember sitting in the Senate, serving alongside of Frank Smith, who became a trusted friend who provided advice even though we contested different political ideas. And so I say to the Smith family, Frank, who I know best of all of them and who I valued over the years, but I say to his wife, to his children, to all of his grandchildren, to the members of the Progressive Liberal Party, we extend our condolences from the Free National Movement and the opposition. We celebrate a life that was well lived. We celebrate a complex man who served with humility and whose contributions were many. And we pray that his soul will rest in peace and rise in glory.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Member, would you like to, just let the document be brought up? Order the document to lie on the table. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for St. Barnabas.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. First, let me give Almighty God thanks for allowing me to wake up again in this beautiful country, the great country, the Commonwealth of Bahamas. Madam Speaker, it is in fact occasions such as this that I wish, and I'm sure other members here wish that can last all day and for the period of an electoral cycle, because it truly is a reminder in a profound way why we are here and why it is that we do what we do, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I consider it a blessing at 46 years old that I've had the opportunity very early in my life, from a very young age, I would say as young as 8 years old, to understand and appreciate the commerce of relationships and how important they are to your individual progress and development as a person. So I would have been very fortunate at a very young age to pump gas at my stepfather's gas station on Shirley Street and Stage Road. And would have had the opportunity to come in contact with some of the greatest sons and daughters of our country, not just those nationally, but also ordinary behaviors that continue to contribute mightily to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I can remember putting the gas in the tanks of the father of the member for Anniston, Amy Hanna, Celestial Thompson, who was the first Commissioner of Police in independent Bahamas, Purvis Bain, and the list goes on, Madam Speaker. And later on in life, I would have been fortunate enough to associate myself in a number of fraternal and civic organizations, and one being the Lunch Bunch that I've mentioned before. The member for Fox Hill is a member, as well as the member for Pinewood. And it was on those occasions, Madam Speaker, that I got a chance to meet and to have many conversations with the Honorable George Smith. And you have to keep in mind, Madam Speaker, that for a young man, a young politician as myself, to be able to have conversations with the likes of George Smith and also Sir Arthur Folkes, Sir Orville Turnquest, these great men on whom shoulders that we stand, with something that continues to stay with me to this day. Actually, most recently, I think it might have been a month ago, at a recent lunch of ours, I had the opportunity to sit down with the Honorable George Smith. And what has always been consistent is, yes, his love for the Progressive Liberal Party, no doubt, but make no mistake, his love for the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and his constant encouragement about, in this 50 years, where we need to go in the next 50 years. At one time, the name George Smith was as synonymous with Exuma as the name Georgetown. And for many persons, in fact, you know, they probably would say that Exuma was indeed George's town. But that was the significant impact that George Smith had on the people of Exuma and the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Again, I always thought it was important, though younger, to understand the contributions of persons like the Honorable George Smith, his contribution to the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Transport, and to the Hotel Corporation, and all of the other contributions he would have made while serving 29 years in this Parliament. And in a time, Madam Speaker, where we are trying to get re-elected to serve in this honorable place for 29 years speaks, indeed remarkable, speaks to the volume and the magnitude of who the Honorable George Smith was. Madam Speaker, in that most recent conversation, and this just reflects, again, his ability to, if you will, to compartmentalize different issues when he would speak to you. You know, he said to me, he said, boy, Brother Cartwright, you just got elected over a year ago, deputy leader of the Free National Movement, he say, who knows? Say very soon you might be deputy prime minister, you know? And, you know, I said to him, I said, Mr. Smith, you know, that would mean that your party would have to lose the next general election. And, you know, he was very gracious in his remarks. He didn't necessarily want to concede that. But his focus was on what I was able to contribute, he saw, to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and the development of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Madam Speaker. As I close, Madam Speaker, and the leader of the opposition, the member of Parliament for Marco City, talked about it. In this 50 years of independence, as we reflect on who we are as a people and the thoughts of where and the prospects of where we ought to be going, the true legacy of persons like the Honorable George Smith and others that have passed on should be felt in what we do going forward and how we contribute to our country, how we give up and continue to sacrifice. Because truly, as I always say, Madam Speaker, the distinctions before and after our name is not what people will remember. They will remember how we would have contributed mightily to the development of our country, Madam Speaker.
Yes, sir.
Madam Speaker, 2 Corinthians says that I've poured out myself like a drink offering. The Honorable George Smith has poured out himself for his people and for his country. And indeed, the Bahamian people and the Commonwealth of the Bahamas is better for it. We honor him and we thank him for his service. May his soul rest in peace and rise in glory. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The table. Going on to business. We will now go down the order of business. Introduction and swearing of new members. Laying of documents by ministers. Thank you, Honourable Member. Statements and communication by ministers. The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini.
Madam Speaker, I beg leave to lay on the table of the House a copy of the following: the public holidays writ Monday 2023, opening of shops notice 2023.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Order the document be brought up.
No further documents, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Statement and communication by ministers.
No communications, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Communications by the clerk. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign seat, and new writs. Petitions of presentation of petitions. Presentation of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills.
Madam Speaker,
The chair recognizes the Honourable Member.
I wish to I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a copy of the following: a bill for an act to amend the Boat Registration Act.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Is there a seconder? Second. Thank you, Honourable Member. Order the document be brought up. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for the first time. Boat Registration Amendment Bill 2023. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that
Madam Speaker. The bill will be included in the compendium bills during the budget debate, Madam Speaker. We've received support from the opposition. Madam Speaker, you wish to confirm?
Thank you, Honorable.
No objection.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order that the bill be read for the first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to amend the Boat Registration Act.
Thank you. For the first readings?
No further first readings, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Second reading committee of bills? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I rise and beg leave to, to cause a debate for the passing and second reading of a bill for an act for the appropriation of diverse sums of money for and towards deferring the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas on revenue account for the financial year commencing the 1st of July 2023 and ending on the 30th of June 2024. Madam Speaker, accompanying, that is what we call the anchor bill, along with the bill for the appropriation of diverse funds for capital development for the financial year ending the 30th of June 2024. But there are several money bills that accompany the budget exercise, which is led, as I said, by the bill number 74. We will be debating this as a compendium, as is the usual practice at this stage. All bills related to the draft estimates of revenue and expenditure and the underpinning legislation. We expect that we'll be able to debate those as a compendium. If I have to list them now, I could, but they all, you want me to list them? Okay. I read the bill for deferring of expenses. The next bill will be deferring of expenses for capital development. That's bill number 73, bill number 74, bill number 75, a bill to amend the Family Island Development Encouragement Act, bill number 76, a bill for an act to require business license, to require businesses to hold a business license and to repeal the Business License Act of 2010, a bill for an act to amend the Real Property Tax Act, a bill for an act to amend the Public Finance Management Act, a bill for an act to establish a fund for deposit of revenue derived from immigration fees, a bill for an act to amend the Stamp Act, a bill for an act to amend the Customs Management Act, a bill for an act to amend the Value Added Tax Act, a bill for an act to make new provisions for the imposition and collection of customs duties, a bill for an act to provide for the imposition and collection of excise duties and excise taxes, a bill for an act to amend the Tax Appeal Commission Act, a bill for an act to amend the Insurance Act and to validate the collection of premium taxes, a bill for an act to provide for substantial economic presence and annual reporting of commission entity carrying relevant activities for connected purposes, a bill for an act to amend the Constituency Capital Grant Act, a bill for an act to establish a Tourism Development Corporation and the Tourism Development Fund, a bill for an act to amend the Hotels Act, a bill for an act to amend the University of Bahamas Act, a bill for an act to amend the Fisheries Act, A bill for an act to provide for the sale of plants and animals by the Department of Agriculture. A bill for an act to amend the Immigration Act. A bill for an act to amend the Proceeds of Crime Act. No, that wouldn't be. Yeah. A bill for an act to amend the Animal Protection and Control Act. A bill for an act to amend the Bahamas National Trust Act. A bill for an act to amend the Road Traffic Act. A bill for an act to amend the Port Authorities Act. A bill for an act to amend the Passenger Tax Act. A bill for an act to amend the Harbor Dues Act. And in essence, for the Boat Registration Act that was laid this morning. We just have a copy of it. Thank you. And a bill for an act to amend the Boat Registration Act. So, Madam Speaker, they would be on the agenda items starting at item number 73 through to 101, but with the Boat Registration Act, that is likely to be 102. So we could add, make this 102. And as is the practice, this will be, those bills will be debated as a compendium.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Marco City.
Madam Speaker, we are concerned only about one of the bills that we think should be a standalone debate, which would be the tourism bill, the tourism development bill, and wish to raise that issue. If there are no matters that are essential in the passing of the budget, that is a very weighty bill that, again, when it was initially introduced, the member for Exuma and Ragged Island, we got the impression intended to bring that back as a standalone bill, and we certainly were in cooperation with that, but are a bit concerned that it's now being lumped in during what we believe is a very weighty schedule with a number of significant amendments to other bills, and would ask that we look at debating that as a separate entity.
Colleagues, well, first of all, it is a bill that speaks to revenue. It's a money bill, right? And one of the reasons why, quite apart from another internal consultation we're having, we thought it would be dealt with in any event because it sets up a fund. And there's a revenue stream that's deriving from, for this, a money bill. And so since we are dealing with that, this is the appropriate time to deal with it. I really invite you to have your comments. I mean, you'll have plenty bites at the cherry, you know. When you'll have it during when you have your 2 hours or your 1 hour. When we have, when we go into committee, when you go into committee, you have the opportunity to deal with it. When we go into the heads, you'll have an opportunity to deal with it. So you'll have many opportunities to deal with it.
Thank you, honourable member.
But again, when both leaders of the House get together and try to improve our system for deliberations, right now the rules allow for what we're doing, and we'll invite you just to make whatever concerns or make your contribution to the bill, any proposal that you may have to improve it or otherwise during the course of your discourse in Parliament. Madam Speaker, Last Friday was Labor Day. That is always an important occasion, but an especially moving one in the year that we celebrate our 50th anniversary of independence. Moving, Madam Speaker, because it was the courage of Bahamian workers standing up for fairness and justice and dignity that ignited the fire that could not be extinguished. A fierce conviction in the hearts of our people that we deserve to be a free and self-governing nation. On Friday, I marched to honor our country's leaders and activists, past and present. I thank God for giving our country the fighters we needed when we needed them, and showing us that when we stand side by side, shoulder to shoulder, injustice can be overcome. Yes. That is a lesson that continues to echo and inspire. We can be very proud of how far we have come, while still acknowledging that there's so much work yet to do. To build a country in which all Bahamians are lifted up, to build a country in which every one of our children can reach for their stars. That work is why we're here today. That is the purpose driving us forward. And that is the vision, a vision which honors the dignity and potential of every one of us. That is the vision behind the budget we are presenting to the people of the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, it ain't always pretty, but it does keep you real. Just as our nation's independence was rooted in the courage of Bahamian workers, and just as the roots of a tree anchor it to the ground, my roots in Cat Island serve as my anchor. Over the weekend, I had the chance to dance with young and old at our Rake and Scrape Festival, and to enjoy the warmth, humor, and straight talk of Cat Islanders. Cat Islanders are always going to serve you the truth, straight up. And like I was saying, it keeps you real, even though it's not always pretty. And it remains the great privilege of my lifetime to represent them, and to represent the equally straight-talking and magnificent people of Rumkey and San Salvador. It is wonderful to see progress coming alive in my constituency. Yes. We are a government with a serious plan for the development of our family islands, which you will hear about in great detail during this month of debate. We are going to bring progress and opportunity and new resources to our islands, while still maintaining the traditions, culture, and the way of life that make them special. But Madam Speaker, I hope you will permit me, on my birthday, an additional moment of reflection. I've been thinking about some of my younger colleagues who sit in cabinet and other positions of great responsibility, who entered government full of zest, ready to usher in a new day for the country. They have overseen some exhilarating successes and experienced the great blessing of seeing their hard work translate into real, tangible change for our people. But there have been setbacks too. That is because government is a human endeavor. And there's no human endeavor, no business, no church, no institution of any kind which does not experience challenges, sometimes very serious ones. Enduring progress is hard to deliver. But we do this work to make a difference. So even as we battle forces of inertia or obstruction or even dishonesty and malice, we must never lose sight of what a privilege it is to serve. Look, accumulating so many birthdays has many upsides and one or two downsides. It is possible, although I'm not confirming it, that I'm not quite the second baseman I used to be. And that's the downside.
That's what
But one of the upsides is perspective. Perspective. So let me share what's really important. Let me share what really matters. In our first 20 months, we opened 2 airports in the Family Islands. Yes. And we're going to open 14 more. Yes. Yeah.
Good.
Our policies to jumpstart our economy help to generate extraordinary job growth. Yes. And we're just getting started. Mm-hmm. We raised the minimum wage and concluded 19 labor agreements. Yes, with more to come.
More to come.
We launched a new era in Bahamian agriculture. Yeah. And we are going to continue to innovate and expand opportunities as we build food security for our country. We built new affordable housing. Yes. And we are going to keep on building. So more Bahamians have the security of home ownership. We have recruited hundreds of new police, immigration, and defense force officers. And our new budget ensures they will have the resources and technology to make a substantial impact. We fortified our investment in border control and strengthened security partnerships, and in so doing, drastically reduced the number of migrants who reach our shores. Despite the escalating crisis in the region, and our new budget provides resources, and for 4 new vessels to our BDF, to Defense Force. So we know about the crisis that's escalating to our neighbors to the south in Haiti. They've had a massive flooding that resulted in loss of lives. Yesterday, they had an earthquake. And despite all the challenges they've been having, we have been able to drastically reduce the number of migrants who've been reaching our shores. When last would you've heard about any landings? Yes. In the Bahamas. Right? We raised, Madam Speaker, salaries and bonuses for nurses and started a catastrophic health care fund. And now we are building not 1, but 2 major new hospitals. Renovating clinics across our islands and launching a new organ transplant program. Speaker, somebody called me this morning to speak about launching about this prospect. And I told them it's real. And they thought that this was a game changer for the Bahamas, particularly in light of the challenges. The advice I got was that we have to sensitize the Bahamian people about, organ donation, becoming an organ donor. and to let them understand that all they're doing is giving life. And that person reminded me that Jesus came to earth to give us life and to give it abundantly. And he said, this is in keeping with giving life. And so, Minister of Health, that person will be on to you very soon to help you in your program. We cut, Madam Speaker, we cut import duties on dozens of food items and invested in social service assistance. And our new budget provides resources for a new school breakfast program. We launched the National Youth Guard program, that's Mario, which provides training and skills for young people who will bolster our capabilities during emergencies. And in our new budget, we have the resources to expand the program, meaning that more young Bahamians and more communities across our country are going to be stronger because of it.
Yes, sir.
We are a leader in sports once again, hosting important games and events. And we're going to continue to build the orange economy and develop Bahamian talent with support of our extraordinary athletes and with a new school for the performing arts. We have raised the country's profile on the world stage and become an important voice in the fight for fair climate finance. And we will continue to build alliances with small island states and others who share our sense of urgency about reducing global emissions and compensating those of us on the front lines of the battle. So you see, Madam Speaker, God has granted us this opportunity to serve, and we are serving with all our hearts. We are choosing to be inspired by progress rather than being discouraged by difficulty. We are choosing to be inspired by progress rather than being discouraged by difficulty. Though we are imperfect to some degree, we can still be used by God to accomplish His purpose. Madam Speaker, we live in extraordinary times. We must hold true to our traditions, hold true to our values and our faith, while embracing the kinds of change and innovation that allow us to fully develop the potential of our nation and people. We have to be open to new opportunities while navigating extraordinary economic and geopolitical uncertainty. The budget for the new fiscal year focuses on 3 pillars for national development: national security, economic security, and personal security. The emphasis on security reflects our conviction that in order to thrive in the 21st century, we must grow stronger, invest in our resilience, and make our country less vulnerable to external shocks. Our country is finally moving on and in the right direction, gaining the momentum we need to make such changes and investments. The economy is open. The government's fiscal performance is improving. Bahamians are working. Businesses are thriving. And our children are making up for lost time in school. Now, we cannot predict when the next storm or plague will descend upon our shores. We cannot predict the trajectory of global inflation. But we can be better prepared for crisis. And we can invest in our people and in our economy so that we are also better prepared to seize new opportunities. Madam Speaker, when we came into office 20 months ago, we face multiple crises. The nation had a ballooning debt and a fiscal crisis. Jobs were scarce, and our economy reeling from the curfew and a series of lockdowns was in crisis. Our hospitals were full, and our healthcare system was in crisis. And our schools were closed with no plan to repair and reopen them, leaving our children in crisis. And much of these woes were intertwined with the heart of the problem. The heart of the problem, a governance crisis. A competent authority who turned out to be not competent at all. A government that became addicted
Honourable Member, are you yielding?
to emergency powers.
What's the point of order?
What is the point of order? You have to state the point of order.
Honourable Member, what is your point of order?
The member, Madam Speaker, has made a statement that is inaccurate. Madam Speaker.
100%.
Madam Speaker.
100%.
For the member to talk about lost time of students is we take no issue with lost time. We all know what those figures are. What we do take an issue with is the statement that no attempt was being made to repair schools and open schools. That is not accurate. It is misleading, Madam Speaker, and it's inaccurate. And so we asked the member to present what evidence he has that schools.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
You won't be the guardian of the rules, Fort Charlotte. Follow the rules. You follow the rules.
Madam Speaker, you know, you must appreciate, please appreciate the difference between when I'm opinion of what you left is different. It does not amount to a point of order because you differ from my views on that. So what you need to do is when you get up to speak, you just clarify your point. It's not a point of order.
That is correct.
Right? You know, it's a different. When we
It's an important speech.
When
Let's hear the minister.
Let's
hear the Minister of Finance.
when we came to office,
Honourable
when we
Member,
came
if
to
there's a
office,
member on the floor.
Important.
well, Madam Speaker, of course, the Minister of Education will speak to these details.
Yes.
So I'm not going to get into details. But I can tell you, if they had plans or had started any work on schools, we would not have to spend how many unbudgeted, almost $60 million to repair schools. Unbudgeted? No, not every estate. I'm telling you what we met. I tell you what we met. I tell you what I meant. So if you had plans, so that's when we came into office.
Don't bring him to. Don't do that.
When we came into office, Madam Speaker,
Colleagues under the bus.
see, we did not waste time at all.
Not at all.
We didn't waste any time. We didn't take a vacation for 6 months, for example.
I remember that. We was in the Senate.
We got to work right away. We lifted the curfew. We ended travel visas. We provided free testing and free masks. Instituted saner health rules. Expunged the records of minor breaches of the emergency orders. And we worked hard, and the Minister of Education worked hard to reopen schools and reopen the economy. We did that. We did, Madam Speaker. Listen now. We did what we promised to do.
Y'all don't have all this success.
We promised that we'll keep the virus at bay, but without strangling the economy. We understood that if we gave Bahamians, because we believe in Bahamians, we understand, you give them, we believe and we understood that if we gave Bahamians the tools to stay safe and keep each other safe, we could fight the virus and revive the economy at the same time. And that's what we did. We believe in Bahamians then, and we continue to believe in them now. This path forward and the progress made would not have happened had the party opposite remained in power.
That's true.
Would not have happened.
That's true.
During the campaign, everyone recall, they said our plan was reckless. They said it. They tried to scare people about what would happen if we took over the battle against COVID.
Yeah.
In fact, I was always reminded I was no doctor.
Yeah.
You're no doctor, I'm the doctor. You all remember that?
Yeah.
The competent authority.
Not a doctor, too.
Yeah, that's right. He kept, the competent authority kept reminding us that he was a medical doctor. He said now, free testing could only happen in Wonderland. You remember that? It only happened in Wonderland.
Welcome to Wonderland.
Right,
In the new day.
but I know medical doctor, and we made it happen. Here in the Bahamas. Not in Wonderland.
Nope.
Not in Wonderland, in the Bahamas, Madam Speaker.
Marco City, too.
Our speed in getting rid of their economy, our speed in getting rid of their economy, crushing policies, was vital to turning the economy around and allowing businesses to thrive again. Up to the election day, their former leader was backed up by his cabinet colleagues, including the current leader.
Marco City too? Marco City was there?
You know, they defended their regime of curfews, travel visas, and repeated extensions of the emergency orders. They defended their use of funds without following procurement policies and with proper controls being put in place. Before that, they defended their government's incompetent and heartless handling of Dorian.
Up to last week.
Right? Remember that? And before that, they defended a 60% increase in VAT.
Yep.
And nobody know.
St. Barnabas.
And before that,
Marco City.
and before that,
Did you know?
before that, Anguston,
Stand up and be counted.
before that, they defended Oban. Remember?
I saw you in town meeting.
They defended the indefensible.
They put that on Grand Bahama people.
Right. And while they were defending the indefensible, we paid them no mind. We were as eager as the Bahamian people to put their failed oppressive policies in the rearview mirror. We opened the economy and revived festivals and regattas, allowing the economy and job market to rebound as local businesses thrive and life returned to normal. Unemployment levels are now down.
Wait to the end.
Unemployment levels are now down to pre-pandemic levels. And the nation is seeing record-breaking arrivals of visitors to our shores. If only they had called the election even earlier, Madam Speaker, the country may have benefited earlier from our evidence-based approach to pandemic management and those in healthcare facilities. We conducted 172,000 free COVID tests and distributed over 1 million free medical grade masks. Madam Speaker, choices matter. Governments do not run on autopilot, and neither do economies. That the country is moving in the right direction today is the result of a measured and strategic approach spanning many areas of policy making. Before I outline key measures in our new budget, I want to briefly review some significant aspects of the foundation we have built during our first 20 months. The work in the year to come builds on this very foundation. In healthcare, we saw the vulnerabilities exposed in our healthcare system by the pandemic and immediately invested in new infrastructure and expanded capacity in public healthcare facilities in New Providence and the Family Islands. We also hired additional doctors and nurses to strengthen public health care. In education, we recognize that the years of misschooling represented an emergency for our children and families. We repaired and reopened schools for the return of in-person learning, launched a task force to tackle absenteeism, and undertook system-wide testing so we can address learning loss. The Find Every Child initiative brought thousands of students back to school, providing them with social and learning support. We launched a national Smart Start program to provide workforce readiness skills to students left behind during the pandemic so that they could qualify for jobs in this growing economy. We moved to hire 200 additional teachers to address pre-existing staffing shortages. We expedited the rebuilding process for storm-affected islands, launched the Home Assistance Repair Program, and passed the presumption of death legislation to expedite that process for those who lost loved ones during Hurricane Dorian. In our northern islands, as well as in New Providence and several Family Islands, we saw the urgent need for more affordable housing, and we began to build right away. We didn't wait, right away.
Right away.
Our predecessors did not build a single home. One single home in 4 years.
And the new trustees coming soon.
Not a single home in 4 years. Within months of our taking office, Bahamians had already began moving into their newly built homes, Madam Speaker, with their keys in hand. Within months. Building affordable housing is a priority for us because the high cost of living in the Bahamas prevents too many Bahamians from building economic security. Life was already unaffordable for far too many in our import-based economy. And then came the global inflation crisis. Around the world, prices have risen to their highest levels in many decades. The problem comes from outside our borders, but we have tried to reduce the impact. We lowered customs duties, expanded price controls, hired new price control inspectors, expanded BAMSI farmers markets.
Yeah.
These measures helped, but not enough. The real solution lies in increased domestic production. We must lower the nation's food import bill. We are making major new investments in agriculture and food security, providing unprecedented funding for local farmers and agribusinesses.
Yep.
A major initiative, the Golden Yolk Egg Project, was launched last year with the worthy, early this year, with the worthy excellent goal of producing locally 100% of eggs consumed in the Bahamas.
Yes.
Got a real minister.
We see all kinds of opportunities in our culture. There is so much room for entrepreneurship and ingenuity. We want as many Bahamians as possible to participate in building a modern, climate-smart industry. Starting your own company is an opportunity to do well for yourself and help your country at the same time.
Yeah.
Just as we support home ownership and Bahamian ownership in farming and fishing, we are also committed to funding and offering resources to Bahamian business owners.
Yeah.
We allocated $50 million for micro, small, and medium-sized Bahamian-owned businesses. We plan to provide $250 million in funding to Bahamian businesses over the course of our term. And for the first time ever, our country now has a national trade policy to empower Bahamian businesses as they engage in international trade. Bahamians will now feel that the government is supporting them in exporting their goods abroad, rather than impeding them with unnecessary bureaucracy and costs. Madam Speaker, everyone knows that I'm an island boy at heart. My deputy too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But our commitment to family island development is a matter of both head and heart. The family islands are crucial to preserving our culture and heritage, and also key to our national development. We have opened airports in Ragged Island and Great Harbor Key.
Yes.
And as I said earlier, we have begun the process to develop 14 airports throughout our family islands. The Family Island Development Trust Fund will assist in developing family island infrastructure, allowing revenues generated in the family islands to stay in the family islands instead of going into the consolidated fund. This is a game changer for so many of our island communities. Major roadworks are currently taking place in the Exumas, and we are in the process of building a number of solar microgrids throughout our family islands. A priority in the coming year is to build sustainable, renewable energy projects throughout our islands, which will lower costs and encourage investments. Madam Speaker, under our first budget, we took care of our public servants by working through the promotions and regularization backlogs in New Providence and the family islands. Back pay and gratuities were paid. Public service pensions were increased, and salary increases were secured for thousands of public servants. This includes our beloved teachers and nurses, who receive salary increases and additional benefits, including a retention bonus for teachers, a $100,000 insurance benefit for the loved ones of nurses who die in the line of duty, and an additional $10 per hour increase for nurses serving during times of disaster. While these increases were well earned, we know they deserve even more, and we will continue to work towards securing additional compensation. When we signed a memorandum of understanding with local unions prior to the last election, we committed to improving labor relations. Now, as I indicated, 19 new union agreements later, we have kept our word. Within these agreements are pay increases and increased benefits for thousands of public servants. We have increased the national minimum wage, a move that was long overdue, but not even seriously contemplated by our predecessors. The choices made by government matter, Madam Speaker. The members opposite tried to scare us off. They told us raising pay for workers could negatively impact businesses and cause jobs to be lost. Remember that?
Yep.
But we had done our homework, and we were confident that we were making the right call. We knew increasing paychecks for Bahamians was both the right thing to do and the smart thing to do.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Now, here we are. Many months later. Businesses are booming, and unemployment numbers continue to grow. You see, Madam Speaker, and those opposite, it is possible to help working Bahamians and attract new investments without affecting growth. In fact, during our first 20 months, we have secured well over $1 billion in new investments. Evidence of the confidence that investors and the business community have in our governance. I wonder how does that stack up to the first 20 months
Oh, that was horrible.
of the previous government?
You mean the 4 years?
The 4 years?
They had a ban.
They did 800,000, 840.
Whole ban was 6
It's
months.
hard to remember.
Whole ban was 6 months in.
It's hard to remember any investment of note during that period. Perhaps because that period was so defined by the Obama fiasco rather than any new investment in the country. Madam Speaker,
Why you let them do that to you?
the problem of crime is a serious one. In our country and throughout our region, crime is a problem, serious problem. It is not a single problem, of course. Instead, it is many problems intertwined, including poverty, neglect, mental health issues, lack of educational skills or lack of opportunities, substance abuse, a myriad of issues. This complexity means there's no single or simple policy solution. Instead, we need action on multiple fronts. We have expanded urban renewal, as well as a second chance program to reduce recidivism. We recruited hundreds of new police, defense, correctional, and immigration officers, and increased funding for saturation patrols in high crime areas. We are working to stop gang recruitment in our schools. I want to say to all Bahamians, when our young people join gangs because they want to belong somewhere, or they don't see other opportunities, or because they think that's the only way they can stay safe, as a society, we have failed them. We all need to do more, but to turn towards the hardest problems instead of turning away, and continue their outreach and support for families and individuals in crisis. We have launched a comprehensive, Madam Speaker, immigration plan to protect our borders and enforce our laws. Our task force on shanty towns is working to ensure that when we dismantle illegal housing, we do not create a new homelessness and a crime problem. In solving one crisis, we cannot create a new one. We continue repatriations at a record pace, even in the face of very strong international calls to stop. I have said very clearly to international leaders and organizations, the Bahamas cannot absorb the burden of crises unfolding in other nations. We will continue to take decisive action to protect our borders, and we will repatriate those who enter illegally. And that's what I've said to them, Madam Speaker. In the 21st century, our national security policy must also encompass measures to strengthen our defenses against climate change. The next time we face a national disaster, our nation will now have the considerable assistance of the members of our National Youth Guard,
Yes, sir.
who have been trained to assist existing personnel in a variety of capacities. These young people who have prioritized services to their nation and are ready to play an active role in protection, rescue, and recovery deserves our congratulations and gratitude. It was very moving for me attending the graduation of the first cohort in Grand Bahama, to see their pride and the immense pride of their parents.
Yes.
You know, it's so easy to focus on the negative. But if you do that, you miss the reasons to feel good about Bahamians and the Bahamas. You miss the many causes we have for optimism. The young Bahamians in our youth guard fill me with hope. When we talk about becoming more climate resilient, many people think first about infrastructure, but we should also think about people, the role that our people can and must play in strengthening our defenses. They will save not just our lives, but our way of life. Madam Speaker, I know I said I'll be brief when laying out some key steps forward that we have taken, and I perhaps stretched the definition of brief a bit far. But in fact, I was exhibiting self-restraint. There's so more to say. There's so much more to say.
I agree.
Yes.
I agree.
I hope my colleagues will.
Give him another.
My colleagues will share more in their contributions so that Bahamians have the fullest possible sense of what is underway.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And Madam Speaker, the story of the first 20 months of this administration must include this final fact. We took all these steps forward as a nation while increasing government revenues, decreasing the deficit, and improving governance through amendments to the Fiscal Responsibility Act, the Public Finance Management Act, and Public Procurement Act. That's what we've done. I know it's confusing to them to see what we could have done with what we did. Despite the health, economic, fiscal, and inflation crises we inherited, we have not made excuses. We have not made any excuses.
No,
We continue to forge ahead.
4.5 years.
We continue to forge ahead with our plans for national development and empowerment of all Bahamians. And that's what we have done. You know, during these last 20 months, we have largely ignored the nearly daily barrage of attacks on us by the members of the party opposite. It is true, they sometimes take a break from attacking me to attack each other. But eventually,
That's a good line. That's a good one.
but eventually, you know, they find their way back to their default, what I call their default setting of partisan warfare.
They're idle, just say they're idle.
You know, I've noticed something very strange about their attacks. I have noticed something very strange about their attacks. It's as if they believe every Bahamian, you know, look here. I've noticed something very strange about their attacks.
Yes.
It's as if they believe every Bahamian in the entire country has simultaneously developed amnesia and remembers nothing about their very recent time in office.
Acting brand new.
But we do remember. But we do remember. We are doomed to remember because we are still living with the consequences.
Last week we got.
Before the bungled handling of the pandemic, there was the tragic and inept handling of Dorian.
Yes.
And before that, there was the shock, 60% increase to VAT.
Oh, my.
What exactly did they do during their first 20 months? I agree with you. I'll say that.
No, they inflict pain and suffering on the people.
But you know, they did worse. They did worse than nothing.
Who was they?
Because they actually set the country back. They set the country back. They entered office on the strength of a good slogan. But that was all they had. Now they want people to believe that they have answers. They have answers. Recovering from the multi-crisis state we inherited required a comprehensive slate of reforms, initiatives, and policies to empower Bahamians. This budget builds on last year's budget. We are building on the foundation that was set over the past 20 months. Our strategy is cumulative and it is strategic. Many initiatives are big enough to require multiple years to fully develop. Remembering the ad hoc chaos of the previous administration, I get that they may not know what strategic national development looks like. Well, they need look no further. There's continuity across budgets and alignment across major policies. And since this is serious stuff, I have a request to make of the members opposite. Don't just oppose. Propose.
There you go.
Yes.
Hey, that's
Propose something.
You borrowed billions, more as a percentage of GDP than many of our regional neighbors, and left the country deeper in debt. You carry on about us collecting taxes from large taxpayers that are long overdue. But where's your plan to pay the debt you incurred? While in opposition during the pandemic, we released two plans, Madam Speaker. A COVID response plan and an economic recovery plan. We understood that simply criticizing or offering an alternative did not contribute to the public discourse. That's why we did it. Their attacks on this budget and on this government should not be taken seriously unless and until they offer serious alternative proposals.
all right.
Madam Speaker, the 2023-2024 national budget is titled A Budget for Security and Progress. The budget reflects the government's commitment to strengthening national security, economic security, and personal safety security. This new budget is a continuation of our efforts to secure the nation's borders, invest in crime prevention, strengthen climate resilience, increase food security, promote Bahamian ownership, expand affordable housing, and invest in education, training, and empowerment. When it comes to revenue generation, our focus has been on simplified and more effective tax administration. These efforts have been spearheaded by the Ministry of Finance, the Department of Inland Revenue, and the Revenue Enhancement Unit. As a result, we are set to exceed our own target of $2.85 billion, which we set for the current fiscal year. The deficit will also improve to $389.5 million, down from $575.4 million. Thanks to the progress we have made, we remain on track to have the first ever budgetary surplus by 2025. This new budget continues where the last budget left off, with a focus on more effective tax administration. Recurrent revenue is projected to be $3.316 billion for the upcoming fiscal year. And the deficit is expected to be around $389.5 billion, a significant year-over-year increase in revenue and decrease in the deficit. There's a number I have to come back to. Madam Speaker, this is good news. This is good news for the Bahamas. Every patriot should applaud this good news. I have a quote here from August 2014. Now, this quote comes from a person whose name is Dr. Hubert Minnis. In this quote, he says, I don't believe in increasing taxes. I I believe in decreasing taxes and increasing opportunities. Increasing taxes is a lazy way out. When you don't want to think, you just tax. Now, I don't know if this Dr. Minnis fellow in this quote is the same Dr. Minnis who increased VAT by 60%.
That's right. That ain't you, Marcos.
On the payment people.
Wow,
But Marco like that line. Marco said he like that. He like that line.
But if it is, but if it is,
Members,
Madam Speaker,
You let me down.
Madam Speaker,
members.
Madam Speaker,
You weren't consistent. I'm sorry.
if it is,
One day I was consistent.
if it is,
No convenient politician.
if it is the honorable member,
60%.
now if that quote comes from the same
No
fellow,
credibility.
if it is that honorable member for Kalani, then he should be happy. He should be elated to know that this budget achieved what he couldn't.
Yes.
Avoiding tax increases,
I felt that.
avoiding tax increases for ordinary Bahamians while creating opportunities for the Bahamian people. That's what we're able to do. Quite frankly, Madam Speaker, it is shocking to see the amount of revenue experts who have all of a sudden sprung up from the woodworks in the opposition. You wouldn't believe this is the same crew who raised VAT and had nothing to show for it. They led this nation to record deficits and left an economy in shambles. Suddenly, they are the world's brightest economists. The member for Kalani described, he described just the other day our efforts as a tax crusade. I think he called me the chief tax collector a few days ago. And the member for Marco City continues to search desperately for new angles for his complaints. But the fact is, we made extraordinary efforts to protect Bahamians from any new revenue measures. 95% of new revenue will come from non-Bahamians.
Yes.
Let's check it. As for tax collection, when we talk about $800 million in real property taxes is owed, the vast majority of these taxes are not owed by your average everyday Bahamians. As homes under $300,000 do not pay real property tax.
Wow.
There's no crusade. Talk to any Bahamian about taxes. The first thing they'll say is, instead of raising new taxes, the government should collect all the back taxes on the books and stop people from ducking their tax bills.
That's governance.
Under this administration, everyone must now pay their fair share, including the friends of the FNM.
That's the problem, I think.
We all know, you remember that one letter from a certain community out west?
One letter.
Was all it took
One letter.
to drop their planned tax measures.
The next day. Oh, I sorry.
The next day.
I can take that back. I sorry.
They say, do it
Now,
fast.
and guess what? And that I suspect that was the most efficient decision this government ever made.
Yeah. Quick too. One day.
In our very first budget, all right? In our very first budget, we lowered the VAT rate, lowered customs duties on essential goods, foods, and services. Taking a look at the previous administration's budgets, we can see that they gave tax breaks for caviar, airplane parts, and the infamous decision to lower duties on washing machine.
Washing machine, commercial.
Helicopter parts.
Helicopter too.
Yeah.
Like we don't know who owns the biggest laundromat chain in the country. Come on, man. Madam Speaker, we are enforcing laws that are on the books.
It's on the book.
Perhaps the members opposite want us to allow some special people to avoid adhering to our laws, just like they did. But this is a new era for fairness. Nobody is above the law, and everyone will pay their fair share. On that note, we are establishing a large taxpayer unit to improve compliance and revenue collection from the 100 businesses that account for $1.7 billion in taxes. Madam Speaker, when the member from Kalani was challenged in November of 2021 on his decision to call an election 8 months early, he defended it by saying he thought he needed a new mandate because he saw headwinds coming and very, very difficult decisions need to be made. That's why he said he called elections. Let me say that again. When the member for Kalani was challenged in November of 2021 on his decision, this is after he lost now, to call an election 8 months early, he defended it by saying he thought he needed a new mandate because he saw headwinds coming and a very, very difficult decisions had to be made. That's what he saw.
Yeah.
That sure sounds like someone who wanted to raise taxes on the Bahamian people after they voted. After they voted, not before. Our government did indeed face these headwinds.
Yeah.
We met the headwinds. He was right about headwinds. But instead of bringing in any increases, our administration lowered VAT from 12% to 10%.
Very meticulous.
When consumption taxes are lower, people spend more.
Drive the economy.
And revenues go up.
Drive the economy.
VAT receipts are now on track to increase by over $100 million during this current fiscal year.
What are you going to do? Put that on the tape?
This is what happens when strategic tax cuts are paired with a booming economy. Revenues go up.
Yes.
Some of the benefits of cutting VAT may be difficult. Some of the benefits of cutting VAT may be difficult to feel in your pocket because of the now global inflation crisis. But our data models indicate that even when we account for inflation, consumer spending is still up.
Yeah.
That is largely correlated with the decrease in VAT, decreases in customs duty, and a well-managed economy. I gotta say this again. You know, they slammed the Bahamian economy with a 60% VAT, and that crippled the middle class. They said that VAT increase would add more revenue. They were dead wrong.
Dead wrong.
They said our VAT reduction wouldn't work. They said we would lose $100 million in revenue.
Dead wrong.
Instead, we have gained revenue. They claim their tax increases would grow the economy and stimulate commerce. And again, they were dead wrong.
Dead wrong.
They cannot win the discussion on taxes.
Wrong again.
So they'll focus on fees.
Yes.
But remember, 95% of new revenue will come from non-Bahamians. And yes, that was a very deliberate policy choice. One example is the adjustment in departure tax for cruise visitors from $18 to $23 for departure from Nassau, Freeport, and Bimini. A departure tax of $25 from all other islands and $35 from departure from a private island. Air departure tax will stay at $29. We've also introduced a tourism environmental levy of $5 for each cruise visitor and a $2 levy for tourism enhancement. The $2 levy would go into a special fund, not the consolidated fund. Cruise tourism is an important feature of our tourism product, but its economic impact has been limited due to concessions provided to cruise ship operators. We're now seeking to address all these matters. Madam Speaker, key revenue policies in this budget are focused on prioritizing business growth within the economy through legislative reform and administrative changes to ensure business owners are encouraged and supported within the means of the law. With this in mind, we are making strides to simplify the means by which business owners renew their licenses. The calculation of business revenue has been clarified in the legislation, decreasing confusion and supporting a straightforward renewal process. In accordance with priorities to support domestic business growth, the government is moving towards a cohesive interlock system of processing business applications. Within this new budget, provisions are made whereby all businesses applying for duty concessions must have a current business license and be tax compliant. This ensures business duty concessions are utilized by those operating within the law. We are encouraging better record keeping within businesses and encouraging proprietors to be responsible for honest reporting. In this regard, only businesses with revenue in excess of $250,000 will be required to have electronic records. Or seek assistance from an independent accountant for the renewal application. As such, while all businesses are encouraged to keep proper records, businesses with revenue between $100,000 and $250,000 can present management accounts to support the application. Businesses with revenue between $250,000 and $500,000 will require accounting certification by an independent accountant. Businesses with a revenue between $500,000 and $2.5 million require a compilation report by an independent accountant. Businesses with revenue between $2.5 and $5 million will require a review statement by an independent accountant. Large taxpayers, namely businesses with turnover over $5 million, will require audited financial statements produced by an independent accountant. Madam Speaker, additionally, non-Bahamian landowners will be required to show proof of real property tax registration and payments before being granted a building permit. This will ensure compliance from the very beginning with real property tax, limiting the likelihood of arrears. Furthermore, in the upcoming budget, we are strengthening the Business License Act, Real Property Tax Act, as well as the Stamp Act to ensure that there are provisions of enforcement to penalize offenses. Such amendments will harmonize enforcement with the sanctions set forth in the VAT Act. In doing so, we're ensuring that business owners and related agents are operating in good faith. Ultimately, we expect that such amendments will reduce tax evasion and capture revenue foregone through avoidance. Madam Speaker, the marine sector is another area where there has been chronic underperformance in revenue. Some of this underperformance could be attributed to bad policy, which we are now correcting. Currently, the combined duty and VAT rate is too onerous in comparison to registering the vessel in the United States, Jamaica, or Cayman Islands. So many Bahamian pleasure boat owners are avoiding registering the vessel in the Bahamas and instead just paying the $1,000 annual cruising permit. In this budget, we are eliminating both the duty and VAT and putting in place an updated fee schedule for the registration of pleasure crafts. This shift will encourage domestic registration of these vessels. In addition, we have put in place a maritime revenue task force, which will be tasked with growing the amount of revenue generated from the marine sector. This would be done in several ways: adopting new policies which encourage compliance, educating law enforcement agencies on maritime revenue opportunities, and implementing a new compliance strategy in which updated penalties for non-compliance would be an important feature. This will include using technology to properly assess entities which utilize the seaboard for docks, marinas, and other purposes. Although we are investing considerable resources in revenue administration, we must be smarter in how we use these resources, as they are not unlimited. We are implementing a National Revenue Targeting Center This center will be situated in the Ministry of Finance and use software to identify anomalies in revenue reporting among taxpayers, which will allow for a more streamlined process for the use of audit resources. Madam Speaker, our revenues are headed in the right direction. The government's fiscal health is much improved, and there's no indication that things will slow down anytime soon. This is what competent governance look like, and I think we all should celebrate where we are. Madam Speaker, as we increase government revenues, we are committed to remaining disciplined in our spending. We understand that a more prosperous Bahamas will yield more revenues in the long term through increased economic activity and growth. Currently, to achieve that outcome, we must create a more secure economy. To that end, capital expenditures we use to make these investments are projected to grow by a modest 5.6 million year over year. Security is a fundamental building block of national development. It refers not only to national security issues like crime and border security, but also to economic and social issues. Security includes the need to build a more resilient and diversified economy with greater Bahamian ownership and opportunities for high-income jobs. It includes greater health and wellness access. It includes greater health and wellness and access to healthy foods and treatments for people at all income levels. It includes income equality and the need to continue to take steps toward a livable wage because we know how expensive life has become. It includes food security and food production, lowering our food import bill and empowering Bahamians to feed themselves. Housing, social security, and education all fall in this, under this holistic view of security as a stabilizing force in our nation. Through increased security, we will build a solid foundation that will benefit Bahamians for years to come. While we refer to this budget as a budget for security and progress, it could also rightly be called a budget for progress through security. Under this umbrella, we have a number of key initiatives that will provide a platform for progress. At the top of our agenda is national security. Securing our borders remains a priority as we forge international alliances and invest in new vessels for the Defense Force to better patrol our waters. Our immigration plan, Operation Secure Restore, is the most ambitious plan ever conceived to tackle the undocumented migrant situation in our history. We will continue the trend of swift, record numbers of repatriations, and we expect to take action on the shanty town soon through the work of the new Shanty Town Task Force. Of course, we cannot talk about national security without talking about crime. Chronically high violent crime levels continue to plague our communities, casting a shadow of fear over law-abiding citizens. Every life lost to the epidemic of crime is one life too many. Bahamians continue to cry out for help. While we acknowledge that crime is a complex social issue that government alone cannot fully control, there are efforts that we must take because every Bahamian has a right to feel safe in their homes and communities. To know that there are communities and even schools within our country where that right to safety and security is infringed upon daily is simply unacceptable. That is not the Bahamas I want to live in. It's not the Bahamas I want to see our children growing up in. Many people have become numb to it all. You can see it on social media, where people are uploading videos of various acts of violence, ranging from assault to murder. There's a casualness with which violence is regarded that should not be the norm for our country. Our approach must be strong. We must send a message to all of the criminal elements in our society that they will no longer be allowed to hold law-abiding citizens hostage with fear. Our response must also be holistic and focus on the cultural and social maladies that have contributed to this epidemic of violent crime. Despite the efforts of successive administrations, crime remains a stubborn social ill. My administration has already launched several initiatives, some of which have shown promising outcomes, but none have yet produced the downturn we would like to see. We have expanded the Urban Renewal Program for community outreach. Again, as I indicated, we have recruited hundreds of new police, defense force, correctional officers to add much needed manpower as we increase funding for more saturation patrols in high crime areas. And we will continue to recruit more officers. In the budget before us today, we are continuing with our holistic approach to fighting crime, which includes prevention, detection, prosecution, punishment, and rehabilitation. In other words, we will invest in social interventions, policing, legal and justice system reforms, and local rehabilitative and correctional facilities. In this budget, community centers will be renovated to keep our young people off the streets and provide them with positive enriching activities. A new judicial complex is under consideration to expand the capacity of the courts. New vehicles will also be purchased for the police force. Yes. We have finalized details and will move forward with our plans to build a women's shelter and provide increased legal aid for victims of domestic violence. We will also allocate more resources for the social support of domestic violence victims. It has already taken too long for these initiatives to be done, and we will prioritize the launch of these initiatives as soon as feasible. Now, violence against women is a major issue within this nation, and I want to reassure our Bahamian women that we are very serious about starting these initiatives within this fiscal year. Yes. We will continue our support of NGOs throughout the Bahamas, many of whom, in their own ways, are working on interconnected issues that contribute to our current crime woes. National security should never be an issue that is cheaply politicized for short-term political gain. As I said in my communication last week, while we must take strong action on immigration and crime, what we must not do is allow the seeds of xenophobia, hatred, classism, sexism, and racism to take root in our politics. We have come too far as a people, too far as a nation, to allow demagogues to cheapen the quality of our national discussions with nasty and divisive rhetoric. This is not to say that Bahamians do not have the right to be passionate about these issues or even angry. It is also not to say that Bahamians shouldn't hold the government accountable to do its part. We welcome accountability, but we don't welcome hatred and violence in any form. I ask all right-thinking Bahamians to join us in elevating our national dialogue and condemning the hate that has emerged in certain small pockets of our society. We must reject this poison and hatred. It is just not who we are. No, that's not who we are. Madam Speaker, there are certain fundamentals that a government must get right if it is to be deemed a success. National security is one of those core areas. Another central area of national importance is infrastructural development. Our roads and transportation systems, communications and electrical networks, water and sewage pipelines, and physical structures all play a central role in providing jobs, promoting growth, attracting investors, and ideally providing Bahamians with quality experiences when they make use of these systems and structures. The comprehensive roadworks in the Exumas was a much-needed improvement to the roads in one of our emerging economies. Other road projects will be rolled out in Cat Island, Long Island, Eleuthera, and New Providence.
There you go.
Several months ago, the government launched a preliminary RFP process requesting bids for airport development in the Family Islands. That process will now begin moving forward as we prepare to redevelop 14 new airports, as I said earlier, in our Family Islands. Family Islands that will benefit from this major redevelopment process can expect a similar degree of transformation as seen with Nassau's airport, not necessarily the same scale, but the same quality. Just as a reminder of all the airports included in this process, the New Bight International Airport on Cat Island, Exuma International Airport in Morristown, Great Exuma, the Staniel Key Airport, Black Point Airport, and Farmers Key Airport, also in the Exumas. The Leonard Thompson Airport at Marsh Harbor, Treasure Key Airport, and Sandy Point Airport as well. In Eleuthera, it will be North, Rocktown, and Governor Saba. And of course, Long Island International Airport will be included, as well as Congo Town Airport in South Andros, and some redevelopment of the San Salvador in Amsterdam. We are talking about improved, Madam Speaker, modern facilities, as well as expanded capacity for increased arrivals. The Grand Bahama Airport is a part of a separate process that will also see a modernization and upgrade process. Counting Grand Bahama's airport, that is actually 15 airports throughout our archipelago, all located on Family Islands. We said we are moving away from the Nassau-centric model, and these are the first steps. It is no coincidence that almost all of these islands also have major multi-million-dollar investments in existing or new resorts and attractions also in the works. This is an example of the kind of alignment between strategic investments and national development we are pursuing as we prepare to see significant growth in our Family Island economies. This is not to mention the $22 million allocated for the adoption of solar technologies in sites in Maguana, Inagua, Crooked Island, Acklands, and Long Key, a major investment in renewable energy for our southern islands. No part, Madam Speaker, of the Bahamas being left out. None. Right? There's this wave of development, national development.
Ride the wave and brave.
Madam Speaker, it is no secret that the cost of living in the Bahamas has caused great hardship for many Bahamians. Our dependence on imports for a majority of the goods consumed here has taken a financial toll on many Bahamians, households, and businesses. The global inflation crisis has only worsened the situation. We get most of our imports from the U.S., so when their annual inflation rate for the past 2 years has hovered near or above 5%, it has a compounding effect on our own inflation rates, as we must pay their prices, plus the cost of shipping and any related duties, taxes, and fees. Food prices have been particularly bad. In a typical year, food prices go up in the U.S. by about 2%. But from 2021 to 2022, prices went up as much as 11%. And then again, from 2022 to 2023, prices went up nearly 8%, far above the usual 2% rate. Once again, even in times of inflation, we must pay their price, plus shipping, duties, and other taxes and fees. That is simply to get the item here. If that item is being sold locally, then the cost and the profit of the local business plus 10% are added onto the final price. Considering these facts, it is because of the global inflation crisis that prices have spiraled out of control in the Bahamas. Of all these factors I've outlined, the government only has short-term control over two of them, customs duties and VAT. Those are the two mechanisms in this entire process to which we can take immediate actions that could have direct impact on prices. In consideration of this fact, VAT has been lowered.
Yes.
Yep.
Customs duty has been eliminated on a number of healthy foods.
Yeah.
By taking action, we're able to somewhat mitigate some of the impact on Bahamian households. However, because of historically high global inflation combined with the compounding effect of all the additional costs of importing an item, this was not enough to prevent prices from rising. Another area where the government can have an impact is on price controls, which limit the amount of profit a business can make on specific protected items. Once again, we took action by introducing new price controls and hiring new price control inspectors. While this prevents retailers from making exorbitant profits by putting a cap on their profits, it cannot reverse the impact of global inflation. However, it was a necessary act to protect Bahamian consumers at a time when the cost of everything is going up and they cannot afford for any local businesses to take advantage by making outlandish profits. For those who were paying attention, you would note that we went to bat for Bahamian consumers to make this happen, ensuring that these protections were put in place. It could not completely alleviate the impact of rising costs, but we are living in a time when every dollar counts. Lowering VAT, lowering customs duties, increasing enforcement on price controls, and introducing new price controls, we use an all of the above strategy in our attempt to provide some relief. Prices still grew at a rate that none of us are comfortable with, a rate that hit the pocketbooks of Bahamian households. But I do believe that our policies make a difference, even if only prevented prices from increasing even the more, because every dollar counts. Yeah.
Madam Speaker,
West Grand Bahama.
the distinguished member for Cat Island will continue beyond the 1 o'clock hour. Madam Speaker, ask the House to agree that we exceed the 1 o'clock hour.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House proceed beyond the 1 p.m. hour. As many are in favor, will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The business of this House will proceed beyond the 1 p.m. hour.
Madam Speaker, to complement the activities I just pointed out, we provided more support for food programs through social services. This allowed us to provide additional help to those who need it most. We have also provided for salary increases outlined in multiple public sector agreements, benefiting police officers, defense force officers, prison officers, social workers, teachers, nurses, and many others. In fact, we have signed 3 agreements in respect to all of these to run from July 2022 to June 2025 to increase allowances and salary scales through a $40 million industrial union agreement. And we have allocated funding in the Ministry of Finance for a thorough evaluation of salaries in the public sector to ensure equitable compensation. For Grand Bahama, where opportunities for employment are very needed right now, we have allocated $4.5 million for an employment program. We also increased the national minimum wage so that those at the bottom of the pay scale could better make ends meet. For all the public servants and minimum wage earners who benefited from these increases, I am certain that these pay increases provided much needed relief. Having more money in their pockets helped to cushion the blow of this inflation crisis. In this upcoming budget cycle, we will also be exploring the role of the Public Service Contributory Pension Plan so that public servants can get increased benefits upon retirement. But all of these actions, all of those actions don't fix the central issue at hand. Prices are way too high for everyone. And hearing about these kinds of limitations is not what Bahamians want to hear. People have been crying for relief, and we have done our best to use every option in the book on all above and all out above, on all the strategies I've outlined above. To manage the situation, that's what we have done. Providing relief for our people has been our #1 priority. But to the average Bahamian, something about the situation just doesn't feel right. There must be something more we can do, something more the government can do. I want the Bahamian people to know that we agree with you. Although the path to these solutions may take some time to lead us to where we want to be, there are two major things the government can do in the medium term to change the situation for good. The government, food security. The government has committed to lowering our food import bill by 25% by the year 2025. It is an ambitious goal, reflecting the fact that immediate action must be taken. We have introduced historic investments in agriculture and food security. I spoke about the Golden Yolk Egg Program as an example of the kind of large-scale action we can take on this issue. More investments are coming in poultry production and other high-consumption areas of agriculture. By targeting these large areas, we are simultaneously increasing food production in high-demand areas that also have the greatest potential to impact the food import bill, while also securing large-scale opportunities for Bahamian farmers. We're not talking about subsistence farming here, Madam Speaker. We are creating unprecedented, profitable opportunities for Bahamian farmers and agribusiness entrepreneurs. Funding was set aside specifically to provide grants and loans to this group. Other support will be given as well through the new Agriculture Administration Cadet Program, the expansion of BAMSI, the development of additional farmers markets, and the supply of equipment to local farmers. This historic investment also includes the use of smart greenhouses, agricultural research facilities, the fishing port program to train local fishermen on how to make and use fishing ports, and the citrus tropical orchid development, which will be located in Andros, Cat Island, and Eleuthera. Our children will learn about opportunities in farming within our primary schools, and they will get hands-on experience through the hydroponic program and rice bed initiatives. This is how an industry is built, Madam Speaker, by providing opportunities for entrepreneurs, providing technical and technological support, and by educating children for the opportunities of tomorrow. As long as our food import bill is so high, we'll always be limited in our ability to manage inflation. Through agriculture and fisheries, we can finally start making progress on feeding ourselves and being less reliant on expensive imports. The next big solution that will allow us to drive local costs down is energy reform. The solar farms being built in Migona, Inagua, Crooked Island, Acklands, and Long Key are just the beginning of what will eventually be the widespread solarization of the Family Islands, just like with Ragged Island. These islands will benefit from a more stable electrical supply and more affordable electricity. Throughout the Bahamas, we will also encourage the adoption of solar power by local businesses through the allocation of $20 million that will specifically be used to facilitate the solarization of small and medium-sized businesses. We encourage the business community to take advantage of this opportunity to lower costs through renewable energy. The approach to energy reform in New Providence will be multi-phased. The cost of electricity is far too high, and people need short-term relief. Unfortunately, solarization in New Providence is a far more costly and time-consuming venture. However, we will continue to pursue avenues to explore a feasible approach to significant solar power generation for residents of New Providence, because in the long term, it will be worth it. Renewable energy is the future of power generation, and it is time for the Bahamas, inclusive of the Family Islands, New Providence, to take real steps towards a sustainable future that will provide more stable, more affordable power for everyone. We also understand that people need help right now. That is why we are completing negotiations for LNG power generation in New Providence to make electricity more affordable. These are real solutions that will be initiated this budget cycle, Madam Speaker. At the end of this process, Bahamian households and businesses will appreciate our efforts to provide relief for them. These are not one-off stopgap measures, but major developmental initiatives. We are not tinkering at the edges. We want to transform the economic infrastructural fabric of our nation to make life better for all to come for decades. Madam Speaker, renewable energy is important, not only because of its economic benefits, but also because of its benefits to the environment. As one of the most vulnerable countries in the world, a country that has become a leading voice on the issue of climate change, it is critical that we practice what we preach on climate change. But to make the necessary investments, we will need more resources. More assistance will be needed from the wealthy developing nations, who are the primary drivers of the climate change. This is why I've championed the cause of the Bahamas and the other small island developing states on the world stage and advocated for the carbon-producing countries to do more to help us. While it is critical that we continue to advocate, we are not content solely to sit back while global temperatures continue to rise. In this budget, $80 million will be dedicated strictly for the mitigation of the impact of climate change through climate-resilient infrastructure. Meanwhile, we will continue to complete our foundational research for the generation of blue carbon credits to produce additional funding for climate resilience through a market-driven approach. As I said before, even small countries like ours have a role to play in helping to move the planet towards net zero. In fact, our very survival as a nation is dependent on global progress toward this goal. It is in our best interest to do everything we can here and abroad in the fight against climate change. In this upcoming budget cycle, Madam Speaker, we will continue the initial work done during the current cycle to strengthen health care. This is an area of great concern for Bahamians who rely on our public services to meet their health care needs. We know that public health care is a far cry from where it needs to be. So we will continue to invest in improving government clinics throughout the Family Islands, as well as constructing new hospitals in Grand Bahama and here in New Providence. This is a game changer, Madam Speaker. Overcrowding and resource challenges in our public hospital have gone on for far too long. I am sure both the public and healthcare professionals will be relieved to know that soon the modern facilities that they need will be available. We will improve healthcare coverage through a consolidated healthcare policy, which will provide the benefits of NHI, as well as the prescription drug plan at a more cost-effective rate. We will also provide and expand private health insurance coverage for thousands of public servants. In the near future, we will provide more details on the announced National Organ Transplant Program that will be initiated this fiscal year. There will be a new day for healthcare in the Bahamas, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, We have addressed national security, food security, energy security, health security. Another central development pillar where we are making major investment is in education. The National School Breakfast Program will be launched this fiscal year, and I'm sure many children who are currently beginning their school days while fighting off the pangs of hunger will benefit greatly from this program. Their parents will likewise be able to breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that their child will be provided with a nutritious meal to start their day. As we get our children off to a strong start, we must also ensure that their lessons become more enriching as well. We have increased the overall investment in education, and we are expanding BTVI throughout the Family Islands.
Yes.
To build on the salary increase and retention bonuses we instituted, we must also invest in more supplies and resources for our teachers and hire and train more education professionals. The 200+ teachers, aides, and counselors we hired was a start, but more manpower is needed. We will continue to engage those who dropped out of school during the pandemic with learning enrichment and additional support. Madam Speaker, one of the major objectives of the educational system is to prepare our young people for future opportunities. As such, there must be an alignment between what they are learning and the direction the economy is headed. One of our primary focuses is the development of the orange economy. The beginning of the construction of the first ever National School for the Creative and Performing Arts will mark a major milestone as we educate the orange economy innovators who will drive development of this sector.
Yes.
We are also investing in athletics. Throughout the Family Islands, we are investing in sport facilities like the one now being completed in Cat Island to promote sports and athletics throughout the nation by providing state-of-the-art facilities for our young people. Grand Bahama will be getting a special project with the construction of a 50-meter pool.
Yeah.
We have set aside funding to promote a greater interest and involvement in sailing as our new national sport.
Yes. Yes.
Madam Speaker.
Yes.
Madam Speaker, as we invest in the security of Bahamians, we acknowledge that the very few things that make a person feel as secure, there are very few things that make a person feel as secure as having a place they call home. Home ownership is a dream. Home ownership is a dream that has remained out of the reach of many Bahamians. This is, in part, due to a lack of affordable housing developments in the Bahamas, after over 4 years without one affordable home being built. There's now a surplus in demand that the government will move swiftly to fill, as we help more Bahamians to attain the Bahamian dream of home ownership. In this budget, we will continue to fund affordable housing developments throughout the Bahamas and in islands across the country. This budget will allocate funding for the government's innovative rent-to-own program to expand the profile of people who are able to access their dreams of owning a home. You know, I remember last year when we first launched our housing initiative, one of the first person to get the keys to their home was still a teenager, Madam Speaker. A hard-working young Bahamian who took initiative and paid off for her in a big way. That is exactly the kind of person who will benefit from our housing programs. People who have what it takes to be a homeowner. They just need a viable path to get there.
Yep.
And we are creating that path for them. I believe the side opposite gets it, Madam Speaker.
Yeah, they get it.
They may act like this is not a big deal,
Say Barnabas
but they know how powerful home ownership is. That is why they trotted out a so-called development right before the last election. You know, I say so-called because none of the prerequisite protocols or standards were followed. And none of the required groundwork was done. but at least they understood the marketability of homeownership as an idea that Bahamians cared about. It's a pity that they only use it as a ploy to get unearned votes and not as a way to actually get more Bahamians to be homeowners. Well, that's why we are here, Madam Speaker, to make real what many thought was just a dream and fulfill a vision that many assumed was out of reach. This is just a glimpse of what we will achieve through the 2023-2024 national budget. There's a lot more that will be revealed as each ministry presents throughout the course of this debate. Madam Speaker, it is astounding how many of our major policies and initiatives have their roots in the blueprint for change and our mandate to deliver a new day for the Bahamian people. We have lived up to our words and commitments made, and we have no intent of letting up now. It's astounding to me that anyone on the side opposite can listen to what we have done in the past 20 months and listen to how we will build on these achievements over the next 12 months and simply say, it's not enough. Not enough compared to what? Certainly not the 4 years, now we have 20 months now, not the 4 years when they earned the title of least accomplished government in Bahamian history. I hope they didn't think what they did was enough. We have done more in our first 20 months than they did in the entire 4 years as a government.
Focus.
What we are building is a complete transformation of the agriculture sector, a repair of the damage done to our students during the pandemic, a renewed healthcare system, expanded home ownership, $1 billion in investments throughout the nation, and record levels of arrivals as we continue to make our mark as a regional tourism mecca. They will try to say there's very little new in this budget. And this is because they're not accustomed to strategic national development. These are not one-off initiatives designed for political clout like the programs they attempted to roll out right before the last election. These are long-term nation-building policies that require continuity across budget cycles. Madam Speaker, some seem to think that it is enough to claim credit for superficial attempts at half-baked policies, halfway developed, but never implemented. They hear our announcements of policies we are implementing and claim that they had the ideas first. Well, Madam Speaker, everyone has ideas. You know, that's the easy part.
Bring it to fruition.
The real work is in the implementation, as you say, Elizabeth. We can all have the idea to fly to the moon, you know.
That's right.
But it takes competence, skill, and determination to actually get there.
Correct.
They were all talk. This administration is about action.
Yes.
But if we are entirely honest, they didn't really have many ideas for national development, you know. It was all just a bunch of ad hoc, responsive, outdated attempts at policies. Can you believe all of this talking is coming from the crew whose most notable accomplishment was a 60% tax increase that failed to deliver? What other non-issue will the opposition focus on during this debate?
Nothing.
Yeah, maybe travel.
Oh, yeah.
Madam Speaker, I believe the FNM is so critical of travel because they abused travel so much themselves. Do you remember the credit cards they secured for the spouses of ministers? If we are to be respected if we are to be a respected voice, if we are to be a respected voice on the world stage to represent our interests, then travel is necessary.
Honorable member. The chair recognizes the member from Marcus City.
The member may wish, Madam Speaker, to lay proof of what he said. Certainly, the former Minister of State is on this side, and none of us recall. So if the member can go ahead and if the member can go ahead and lay that or withdraw it until such time that he can lay the information, but we believe it is false. We believe it is false information, and that somebody provided the member for Cat Island with false information, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker.
Harrods in London. Harrods in London.
Madam Speaker.
Whatever cost, put it on. Figure it out.
Madam Speaker.
In London.
Madam Speaker.
Members,
Wife didn't get one.
allow the member to respond, please.
If we are to be a respected voice on the world stage to represent our interests,
Madam Speaker,
then travel is necessary.
there is a point on the floor.
It's not a point
I
of
don't
order.
respond.
It's not a point of order.
I don't
It's
attend.
not a point of order. Come on, please.
I
What is it point of order?
mean,
It's not a point of order. Please.
It's not accurate. It never happened.
It's not a point of order.
He got the files. He got the files, you know.
Stay in the rules.
He got the files.
You know nothing about it. It's not a point of order. It's not a point of order. It's not a point of order.
He got the files.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker.
Require that if an accusation is raised, the presenter has an obligation to verify or withdraw until such time.
Thank you, honorable member.
I made no statements. I made no statements. You have to listen, man. I made no statements. All right? I made no statement. I made no assertion. I asked a question.
Because he wanted an answer.
If I had the facts, no. If I had I asked a question. I decided to ask a question. No, I asked a question.
The chair recognizes Marcus City.
The Prime Minister made an assertion. Whether he wants to make a direct statement or a rhetorical statement, he has made an assertion. And we are simply saying that it did not happen. Spouses of ministers were not provided with a credit card to execute as he suggested. And so we're only asking the Prime Minister to just withdraw it and bring the evidence, because that's an assertion that he made.
Thank you. Thank the member for answering the question. And his answer says it never happened. But right now, it's on the record. I asked the question, he answered it, we'll now move on. It never happened.
No, if Madam Speaker, you are contented with that approach, if you are contented with that approach, that is an approach we could take all day long. We could ask a question all day long. And so I didn't expect that of the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador. Again, and bringing spouses into the picture. How low are we prepared to go? How low are we prepared to go? How low are we prepared to go?
On the floor.
Yes. So, Madam Speaker, is this the rule? Is this the new rule, an approach that we are going to take relative to these assertions? Because it appears to be a rule.
When you say a rule, what are you talking about?
Look, Madam Speaker, we have sat here. We sat here on a regular basis.
Yes.
And we've been asked to verify any accusation made, whether a direct statement or a rhetorical question. We're not slow. And again, Madam Speaker, we've been asked to either withdraw, it's struck from the record, Madam Speaker, or the evidence have to be brought. It cannot be one rule for them and a different rule for us.
No, sir.
And so, Madam Speaker,
No, sir.
an assertion was made, and the Prime Minister ought to withdraw the assertion.
No, sir.
Let me just repeat what I said. All right. Do you remember the credit cards they secured for their spouses? Right? You say you don't remember, and you said it never happened. That's why that's the question. That's the question I asked. That's the question, right? This is the question I asked. You can see it. I'll give you it, right? And so, Madam Speaker, he answered it. Right? So I move on. It never happened.
Members, allow me to hear so I can make a decision.
I asked the question.
Yes, sir.
The question was answered. He's supposed. They are honorable persons. I expect him to understand it. And so.
But you answered.
It was a statement.
And so, Madam Speaker, I accept his answer, and I move on. I accept his answer. That didn't happen. So I move on. I accept the answer, man. It didn't happen. I accept the answer. If we are...
The chair recognizes the honourable member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini.
Madam Speaker, the member for Marco fully understands that even if, Madam Speaker, the member for Marco City is fully aware that the member put out a question. If he interprets it as being rhetorical, that's fine. And he can say whatever he wishes, but the member has said, and the distinguished member will be honest, he said, I asked a question. The member is saying he does not remember. He knows nothing about it. That's accepted as an answer. That ends the debate on that, Madam Speaker. And the member for Cat Island must be allowed to continue his speech.
Madam Speaker, the member just read the statement into the record again. It was not a question. It was not a question. If the Prime Minister is willing to get up and say he is not making an assertion, he was asking, he should say that. Right. But he is making an assertion, he read it. He read an assertion. You remember? You remember? Madam Speaker, that's a statement. That's a straightforward statement. It is a straightforward statement. You remember? You remember the time we had a conversation downtown, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, you remember? It's a statement. It's a statement. It is a simple statement. Members.
You said, I said to you, it was a question. I said to you, it was not an assertion. It was a statement. I said it was a question.
Show him the question mark.
Right? I said it was a question. You answered it, so I'm moving on. I accept your answer. So what else you want from me? I accept your answer. That didn't happen. I wasn't in your cabinet, so I've accepted your answer. Want me to say more than that? I asked you a question. I said, how many times I have to say that?
Let the record reflect that it was not an accusation, it was not an assertion, it was a question.
It was a question.
But if it goes beyond that...
It was a question, and he answered the question, and you could add to the record, I accept his answer.
Yeah. So may the record also reflect that the honourable member said that it never happened for Marco City.
Okay, so Speaker, so as I said, they might be talking about travel. But let me just say this. Madam Speaker.
Y'all ahead of speech. Continue, honourable member.
If we are, as a nation, to be a respected voice on the world stage, to represent our interests, then travel is necessary. If we are to forge alliances and build partnerships to benefit the nation, those kinds of things has to happen. Especially when the previous Prime Minister when he was representing the nation so poorly on the world stage, he went about preferring to call us corrupt than highlight our excellence.
Do I remember that?
Praise the nation, but
Right?
Y'all remember that?
praise the nation, but
This nation deserves to be represented with dignity on the world stage. Building respect and credibility has benefits that are directly tied to our economic, social, and political interests. But building partnerships and relationships isn't like going to the store. You won't come back with a specific item every time, but there's an intangible value being built up that eventually leads to achievement of our national objectives. Anyone who has ever worked in marketing knows the benefits of establishing your brand, expanding awareness of who you are, and marketing the Bahamas to the world. And that was a good one. And that is an essential part of our job. And it is reaping results.
Yeah.
We have forged partnerships on border control and joined forces with other nations on regional gun smuggling. What's the fellow from the U.S. who came? My buddy. The Secretary of Navy came here. What did he have to say about our meeting abroad? I mean, he came here. We are making headway in the areas of international trade and intellectual property protection. Why? Because of my contact in the world and our contact. And we're working along with the rest of the Caribbean and to protect all of our nations from the ravages of climate change. These are worthy endeavors that will pay off. You know, Vice President Kamala Harris is coming here tomorrow, which is the first official visit by a sitting president or vice president since independence. You see, when you conduct strategic international relations, you don't sit in a hotel corridor.
in the back room.
You don't sit. You don't sit in a hotel corridor hoping that a world leader will spare you a few minutes. You don't do that. When you are representing yourself well, they come to see you.
They didn't even offer them a glass of water.
This face-to-face time with a leader of a global superpower, this will potentially yield important resolutions on many of the things we have been advocating for. But once again, those opposites will attempt to undervalue the moment. You know, just several months ago, we were able to pick up the phone in a time of need when we called the President of the Dominican Republic to get Bahamians evacuated from the embassy in Port-au-Prince. He and I met, we were in Argentina talking when we were having the challenges with our Bahamians working for us at the embassy, able to call him. It happened 2 days after we left Argentina. I said, I need some help. He said, what you need? We're trying to get some people out because they're in a serious security issue right now. And he gave some directions, and they came back, and they were flown out by helicopter. But that I wouldn't have been able, if I didn't meet him, didn't know him, I couldn't have been able to just talk to him. This is the power of being a part of, huh? Let me finish. Yeah.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for St. Barnabas.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. The opposition has
Member, address the chair.
through you, Madam Speaker. Prime Minister, the opposition, Madam Speaker, I don't have to look at you, Madam Speaker. I don't have to look at you. You can look anywhere. I don't have to look at you. I mean, you're a beautiful lady. The opposition has been consistent. We know that the Prime Minister has to travel. What we've said is that the Bahamian people are concerned about the large delegations. It wasn't a point of order. The Prime Minister yielded. It wasn't a point of order. All right, it was a point of clarification that the Bahamian people were concerned. That, Madam Speaker, I can't hear myself.
No.
That the Bahamian people were concerned, Prime Minister, about the large delegations.
I just speak to you. What I'm just saying to you is, you see, again, when you talk about, see, if you appreciate what the role is, right? It's not only the Prime Minister traveling here, right? And when you go to these, leaders travel to meet leader to leader. Yeah. But in those meetings, you have your technical people, you have your Bahamians. So if the subject matter covers 4 or 5 subject matters, I have to get the 4 or 5 subject matters, technical people present with their assistance. That's being responsible, right? But you know,
Continue with your speech.
so you know.
Everybody knows that.
So
I feel that. I felt that.
see, I'm just saying. See, we are not an isolation. We're not an isolationist state, and never will be. Travel and interaction with our allies is a part of the job.
That's right.
You know, just 2 weeks ago.
That's the way it is.
2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, May 24th, the New York Times ran an article on climate change. And I invite you all to read it. Right? And they're praising the leadership of the Bahamas, right, in respect to this. They said the Bahamas, as in recent years, emerged as a leader among nations.
Yeah.
New York Times. That's 2 weeks ago. Go and Google it.
Google that.
Right. That's what they're talking about. Right. The year before that, that article, I was privileged to have participated on a panel convened by the New York Times on the subject of climate finance. You know who the 3 persons were on that panel? Right? David Malpass, the president of the World Bank, and Kristalina Georgieva, the managing director of the IMF. The 3 of us was on that panel. This is more than a question of recognition. This is how our country has grown in stature and recognition during the past year and a half. And in fact, that panel discussion resulted in something.
Yes.
Very significant, you know, because and y'all could Google it too.
Google that.
Right? The president of the World Bank is no longer the president of the World Bank, and perhaps you could look at the tape, and you might know why.
Yeah. Google it. You watch the video.
See, y'all may not be accustomed to seeing leaders in the government participate in such high-level global discussions. And you don't get invited to these discussions by talking nonsense about eating stew fish when members of the media ask you serious questions as Prime Minister or fishing for the moon. It was past time. We repaired and elevate our image on the global stage. You like that one? I was pleased that the current leader. No. Let me just say this, right? I was pleased that the current leader of the opposition attended the royal coronation trip.
He traveled.
Partnering with me on a national projection of constitutional partnering with me on a national projection of constitutional dignity, something his predecessor didn't understand. So it was deeply disappointing to see that they choose to launch a series of nasty personal attacks against both of us while we were representing the country at such a significant constitutional moment. Many people in the UK, ask him, were extremely impressed by the demonstration of political maturity which our presidents demonstrated. They could tell you.
That's good.
And wasn't that we you know, and he carried himself the way he ought to as a leader. On a related note, I was able to have several audiences with King Charles where it was made clear that the Bahamas has become a priority. Protocol dictates that I don't reveal the detail of these conversations, but we expect to make some key announcements within the coming months about substantial partnerships with some of the King's organizations and interests, as well as the UK government. I now wish to say a few words about the National Insurance Board. As has been said on several occasions, reform is necessary in order to secure the long-term future of the fund. The problems affecting NIB go back over many years, and we are resolved to address them. And so last night, I issued a statement informing the Bahamian people of an increase in NIB contributions in the next fiscal year. Everybody knows this is not a tax. Everybody knows it is the insurance fund we all pay into to support us in times of need. And so it's lamentable, Madam Speaker, that last night, the Leader of the Opposition chose to play the character of the long-suffering victim, complaining that by giving a year's notice of increase in the NIB contributions, that somehow we are inflicting pain on the Bahamian people. It was the wrong character and badly played. Does he want us to adopt the approach of his F&M administration, which with no notice, even to some of their own parliamentarians, introduced a 60% increased VAT, and 3 weeks later inflicted it on the Bahamian people? That approach caused pain and suffering. He should have learned from that act of folly, and instead chose the character of the supportive friend, acting in the best interest of the Bahamian people. Madam Speaker, isn't it ironic? The very people...
Honourable member.
The very people...
Member, are you yielding?
No, I'm not yielding. That's my opinion. I'm not yielding. The very people...
The point of order is the Prime Minister has misrepresented me in what he said, because what he indicated was not in any statement that I released. And so the point is, I made the point simply, Member for Ken Island, who I'm case example of, that the government failed to provide the required details which it had before them in terms of what would that rate increase and what steps would be taken to remedy the existing problems in NIB. So at no point was this just about the pain being inflicted. It was a failure to be transparent about what had been decided, even though you're holding the information. And I stand by those comments.
That's good. Thank you.
It's character, though. You know, it's very ironic, you know. The very people who viciously oppose setting up NIB in the first place, that's your heritage, that's your legacy, now claim care about NIB.
None of us oppose setting up NIB.
I said your heritage, man. Why don't you listen, man? The very people who want to rely on NIB to save the Bahamian people during the pandemic now don't want to do anything to help build it back up. But, Madam Speaker, the Bahamian people know who to trust. The people on our side, because the people who created NIB are now going to save NIB.
We build it, we'll save it.
We build it, we give birth to it, and we'll save it.
Yep.
Madam Speaker, as we experience progress, we are also conscious that discipline must be exercised in spending, because maintaining healthy debt levels are integral to effective national development. In a little over 2 years, our nation will begin seeing a budgetary surplus that will allow for us to begin chipping away at the national debt. In the meantime, we'll see a slowing at the rate we'll be seeing a slowing at the rate debt growth. What's important is that any debt that is incurred must have sufficient return on investment. What we don't want is a situation like what we saw under the F&M, when $2 billion on average was borrowed each year with nothing of significance to show for it. Not a single major road, clinic, school, or hospital to show for it. In fact, our infrastructure was crumbling under them. The only thing I can recall is the sidewalks that they were going to build during the height of the pandemic.
I remember now.
They also borrowed at excessively high interest rates. They also borrowed.
I remember.
Well, he said, turn it off. Let me just answer this. Listen what I said. I said the FLM borrowed $2 billion each year over 4 years. That's $8 billion, eh?
As a B.
Right? That's not like $8 billion. And then he's saying he paid off PLP bills. What's $800 million?
Yeah.
Well, what happened to the rest of it?
Yeah. That's with the B.
Madam Speaker, they also borrowed at excessively high interest rates because there was no market confidence in them. They were deemed a risky borrower. During the pandemic, other Caribbean governments borrowed at far less than them, but had better results. Take a look at the international rankings for how countries handle the COVID-19 pandemic, and you'll see the administration at or near the bottom of the rankings for most of the pandemic, shattering yet another fable they like to tell about their COVID-19 strategies. We are climbing out of a debt hole created by them. Thankfully, our debt management strategies are paying off. The cost of borrowing in the domestic market has been declining over the past quarters. The average interest cost for domestic loans subsided by 4.62% at the end of March 2023, from 4.89% in the previous year. And the average interest cost for domestic bonds subsided by 3 basis points to 4.63% at the end of March 2023 from 4.66% in the previous year. These stats affirm the government's latest medium-term debt strategy, which aims to shift its borrowing away from costly external commercial debt. Such debt has seen a sharp increase over the past 5 years, including recent interest rate hikes. This strategic move will enable the government to once again rely predominantly on the domestic market to meet its financing requirements. This is a major turnaround from the poor use of funds during the pandemic.
Yeah.
The lack of transparency, the lack of proper records, the complete disregard for procurement policies did not happen by accident.
Yep.
It was by design.
Yep.
Once again, it is critical that any activity that contributes to the additional national debt has a justifiable return on investment. Not only do all the debt and economic indicators suggest that there was a poor return on investment, but even if we wanted to take a look at the return, the lack of records makes that increasingly difficult. There are a lot of outstanding and unanswered questions about the management of our finances during the emergency orders, when all of the power was consolidated under one man. There are still outstanding questions about Hurricane Dorian, as well as activities that took place under specific ministries throughout their term. The Bahamian people deserve to know what resources came in and how it was spent. We are determined to finances. If we are not transparent, and if we do not hold those who abuse the public trust accountable, we run the risk of losing credibility ourselves and trust in the international community. This would have grave implications for the next time we experience a disaster. Nobody wants to provide aid to someone they can't trust. There's a deep suspicion that not all the funds were used in the way they were supposed to be. These suspicions have been deepened by the fact that many organizations involved are reluctant or unable to answer even basic questions. Consider this as an official reminder that we will continue with these investigations. Too much is at stake to just let it slide. Accountability is a core value of this administration, both internally and externally. I know there are those who have cynically proclaimed that both major political parties are the same, but I believe that it is clear that when it comes to accountability, when it comes to priorities, when it comes to making the right choices, there is a clear distinction between our track record and theirs. And in fact, that comparison is insulting, considering how little they accomplished and how much damage they did. This budget will continue to demonstrate the contrast between our parties and indicate to the Bahamian people that in September 2021, they made the right choice for a new day. Madam Speaker, in conclusion, we are still a relatively young nation.
Don't stop, man. Preach.
It must to be proud of. but there is growing anxiety in our society about the way forward. Many Bahamians are concerned that the Bahamas no longer belongs to them. Many are afraid of what the future holds for their children. Many live in fear of crime and are even afraid of falling ill because they simply cannot afford to be ill. As a government, it is our duty to provide security, to build a foundation for a better Bahamas. Our 50th year is a time for celebration of how far we have come, but it should also serve as a turning point and a rallying cry for us to live up to our potential. Progress, Madam Speaker, doesn't happen overnight, but the steps required to see that progress in a real and tangible way must happen and happen now. Yes, sir. There's an urgency with which we work, in recognition of the aspirations and dreams of the Bahamian people and the kind of Bahamas they want to live in during our next 50 years as a nation. The 2023-2024 budget builds on what is already working while establishing key new initiatives that will change life for the better. The pillars of national security, economic security, and social security represent exactly what we need to continue to build momentum toward our vision of a secure, prosperous, and fair society. I ask Bahamians to continue to work hand in hand with us. It is because and through them that the real progress will be made. And I continue to ask for that support. May God bless the Bahamian people as He continues to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes the honorable member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini.
This would be the appropriate time to take the lunch break. After the lunch break, the member for Foxhill will have the floor.
Thank you, honorable member.
Madam Speaker, we will suspend until 4 o'clock.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
Thank you, honorable member. It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House stands suspended until 4 p.m. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The business of this House stands suspended until 4 p.m.
All right.